Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forgotten Generation podcast, hosted by Troy Njenje Mbanga. This podcast is about amplifying young people's voices and the journeys they're on. Today's episode is a Thursday Thoughts one, where we're chatting all things climate change. I am joined by Tash, who is the Imperfect Activist podcast host. And if you want to hear more about Imperfect Activist or want to listen to an episode, please go check it out. I'll leave a description of that show when we finish this episode. But she's also a climate change activist as well. So would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi Troy, thanks so much for having me. This is a brilliant collaboration. It's very exciting. Yeah, I'm Tash. At the moment, I work full-time for a refugee charity in Devon, but yeah, I'm also, alongside that, a youth climate justice activist. And yeah, I've been organising in the UK youth climate movement since I was about 16, so for about 8 years now. And yeah, I'm also a creative. My kind of background is in the arts, and I love kind of using creativity to inspire climate action in different ways. Yeah, really excited to have a chat with you.
Amazing. And it's just so good to have you on this episode. And yes, it's just so exciting. I'm so happy about this. And so what is your climate change journey?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I started kind of realising that climate change was a thing back when I was, a teenager. I just became really anxious about it all. I was quite quiet in school and I was quite academic, and so I found myself when I was a teenager, when I was about 15, 16, reading these things called IPCC reports, International Panel on Climate Change. They released reports about the climate crisis, really, and I remember reading them and just feeling really scared and realising that actually, why is nobody talking about this, and why is the government not treating this in such a way that, this is clearly a crisis and it doesn't feel like we're living in a crisis. And so when I was 16, I co-founded a movement called Fridays for Future in my hometown of Exeter, which was the local wing of the global Fridays for Future movement, the Youth Strike for Climate movement, which was originally started in Sweden by Greta Thunberg, if you've heard of her. So that was how I kind of started, really, and that was just a wild couple of years, honestly, here in the UK, but also for us in Devon. Thousands of young people joined us on the streets to strike from school, who also felt the same way, that climate change wasn't being treated like the emergency that it is, and that our political leaders aren't taking enough action on it. And so I've been kind of organising with different groups ever since. I now kind of organise with a group called Green New Deal Rising a lot, and thinking about kind of the intersectionality of the climate crisis, and thinking about all the different ways we need to tackle climate change. And I'm also, like I say, I went to drama school. I trained in the arts. I studied a degree called Theatre and Social Change, and really passionate about holding spaces that use creativity to inspire action on climate change, but also just create room for the kind of the fear and the scariness and the anxiety, especially that young people are feeling at the moment around the climate crisis, but also all the intersecting issues that's going on in the globe right now. It's a pretty kind of scary world to live in right now, isn't it? And young people are at the crux of that. And and that's kind of why I started my podcast as well, The Imperfect Activist, was to kind of have more of those conversations too. A little bit of an insight into the journey.
I love that. I absolutely love your journey. Like, you've gone through a lot of your journey in climate change. You've done so many incredible things, and you should be so proud of yourself. Like, yes, and now you're the host of Imperfect Activist. Your show talks about these type of things, which is so interesting.
Thank you. I think it's just so important to create more space to talk about it, isn't it? I think especially like just the fear and the feelings around these things. I think we don't hold enough space for the fact that young people are facing a lot today, aren't they?
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. What inspired you in your climate change journey, and what actually made you want to make that difference for the environment, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What inspired me? I think just a lot of the women around me inspire me very much. I think my mum particularly, it's a bit cliche, but she was an activist long before I was, and she very much inspires me to kind of use my voice. Like I say, growing up I was very quiet and I was very introverted, and I didn't really see activism as a thing for me. It felt a bit scary, but when you feel like that, I feel like we're the types of people that absolutely need to be in those spaces, making room for different voices, youth voices particularly. I always find young women are just not represented a lot in these kind of policy spaces when it comes to climate change. So that really inspired me. I think just that passion to like be in the room. Yeah, and just feeling so disillusioned by those in power and feeling like also don't see myself represented in politics a lot of the time. I come from quite a low income working class background, and I just didn't see myself represented in politics, particularly here in Devon. I grew up in quite rural areas, and yeah, I always felt quite radical for my views and quite radical for thinking that we need to do more around kind of climate change and lots of things. And yeah, I think that spurs something within me, because I hope that like, yeah, generation after me doesn't feel that way and feels that they should be in those spaces and that they can make change. And that's all I do in this kind of world of activism, is kind of inspire that. Then yeah, that would be a success for me, I think.
Wow, I just love how you said about all of the things that you said. I love how your mum inspired you as well. Like, that is the most sweetest thing ever. Because I think our parents actually do kind of like and inspire us with things. And I think they actually bring so much knowledge and insight into how we see the world and stuff. And I think they really help us, want to make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful for it. And yeah, I think you become what you see, or whatever that phrase is, isn't it? Like, so yeah, kind of when you're young, kind of what you're surrounded with is kind of what kind of inspires you. I mean, not always, but I think it has a big part in it, doesn't it?
Absolutely is, and I love how you said about younger girls want to create that space for them as well in activism. As you know, it is hard for a lot of young people want to have that voice, and especially those younger girls who might not see themselves, able to have that voice, able to fit in, and to create that space is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
What has been like one positive you like about climate change, and has there been ever negative that you have disliked about it?
Yeah, I think climate change generally, I don't see much positives with it, I'm going to be honest with you. I think, yeah, it's very scary, and I think at the moment it's not really being treated as such still in the UK, but yeah, across the globe, particularly in the Western world. But I think joining the climate movement at such a young age and being a part of a community that, does see that and wants that difference brings me so much hope, like surrounding myself with those people. I just don't think I'd, be sane or actually like be able to get out of bed in the morning without being part of those communities. I think that although it's a really scary world to be in, the kind of the communities that are behind the scenes doing so much organising and so much work to influence change, like even in this podcast community that we're part of, Troy, I think really like brings me so much joy. And that's such a positive of kind of activism in these spaces. It's just like the communities that we have are just incredible.
The communities that come together to really create that meaningful change. Like, you're so right, community and climate change as well, and there's so many incredible people who go out of their way to make a difference in climate change, like yourself, like the Greta Thunberg, and there's so many incredible young people who really go out their way to make sure that environment is safe and making sure that people are listening to what you've got to say. And I think it's just amazing, the community, and I think we should actually quite and appreciate it more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we forget that sometimes, don't we? Like, actually, like, look around, look at all these people that are doing things, and I think that's really important to remember that.
It absolutely is. Has there been barriers that you've faced in your journey in climate change, and like, has there been lessons that you've took away from it?
Yeah, I think of a few things with that. Just generally, like, I think we're all just trying to survive in this country at the moment in terms of like there is a cost of living crisis, and like I say myself, like I'm from quite a low income background, and actually like it's a privilege to be able to kind of join these spaces to talk about climate change when you're just trying to put food on the table and things like that. When I was thinking about this question, I thought back to last week I watched People's National Emergency Briefing. I don't know if you've seen it. It's screened at the moment around the UK, and it's with Chris Packham, and it's showing kind of speeches from the national emergency briefing that happened in London in November. Chris Packham kind of sits down with kind of ordinary people per se and watches these speeches by scientists that kind of lay out the kind of facts and the figures about climate change. And one of the women that was kind of watching this, Chris Packham, one thing she said really stuck with me. She said about, I think people are just, ordinary people trying to get by most of the time, and just trying to pay the bills and things like that. We don't necessarily have capacity to think about all these things, like the big scary facts and the figures, when it comes to those big words like climate change. And so I'm really passionate about making space for that, like I think, and that's what kind of why I started the podcast on the network here, is because that's been a big barrier for me. Like, I found that like I can't be in rooms like the big COP conferences and stuff like that, just because I can't like afford to get there, and also like I need to like go to work and things like that, you know, and that's the reality for a lot of people. But also, those are the people that are going to be most affected by the climate crisis, right? I think the people often that aren't in those rooms because they can't access them. And I think lessons I've learned from that, like you say, I always try to think about, who's not in the room, because there's so many times when I've not been in the room or I've been in rooms where I felt like quite the token young person or quite the token young woman. And I think it's so important to always ask that question, like, who's not in the room? Hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Who's not in the room? That is something I always think about. When I'm in different spaces, I always think, who's not in the room actually? And it's so important that we think about that mindset, because it's so easy for us to be in that room and for us to have that voice, but we also got to think about the people who are not in that room, who is not represented. I think actually, what are they thinking? What are they wanting out of it? And I think it's just so remarkable how you think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we think similar, don't we?
We do. I think it's just so amazing. And so what are the issues you think that needs to be changed in climate change for society, but also for young people, and why? And what do you think the government and people in power need to do better, and in supporting that issue?
Yeah, that's a big question. That could be here for a long time to answer in a short way. The government just generally, I think we need to realise, the crisis that we're living in, like the fact that this is an emergency, and trying to break down that cognitive dissonance a bit, that disconnect that we have now with this word kind of climate and climate change. And I think politicians, we just need people we can trust, and because I think so often we see people backsliding on their climate commitments. I mean, Keir Starmer's just left us recently, but I think he's a key figure where we kind of put a lot of trust in him. And he backslided on his 28 billion climate investment kind of commitment that he had when he came into power, and that lost a lot of trust in young people. I think just in the recent elections, I did a lot of canvassing, knocking on people's doors, talking to lots of young people about politicians and what they want from them. That was a big thing, I think, more so than just like acting on climate change, just being able to trust people that will do that. But generally, I think we need to do big things like phase out fossil fuels and change to renewables. And then I think, like I say, we need to think about wealth inequality and all these kind of intersectional issues. I really believe in introducing a wealth tax. There shouldn't be billionaires. Why do billionaires exist? There's people using food banks. Their money alone can really fuel a green transition. And then I'm a big believer of things like a Green New Deal. Like I say, I organise a movement called Green New Deal Rising. We kind of hold politicians accountable on their climate policies, and Green New Deal is kind of like a set of policies that's already written out by experts, which tackles all the things when it comes to the climate crisis. Also, things like the cost of living crisis, racial inequality, things like that in this country. It's a 10-year game-changing plan to put people front and centre. We have all the answers. We just need the people to implement them. And so, really passionate about holding those people accountable. Also, creating space for, as we do kind of, now we are realising hopefully more and more that we are living in kind of a state of emergency, code red for humanity, we also create space, particularly for young people, I think, to process those emotions. And I love creating these spaces called climate cafes with the Climate Psychology Alliance and Force of Nature, who are different movements, and just for that space, using kind of different creative methods, or just like having a conversation about it. Really, we've got to think about our mental health as well. Young people particularly, I think we've got to protect that and think about that, this is scary and it's okay to feel scared. That's a completely normal, rational response. Sorry, that was talked a lot.
It was good. It was absolutely good. And I loved what you said. And I think it's so important that we talk about these type of things as it needs to be talked about, and also challenged, so that the professionals and people who are listening to this can really understand, why it means so much to you, climate change, and why I think it's so important that we tackle all of the things that you talked about. And also, one thing I want to add on this is also the littering side of it. Like, I see so much littering everywhere, like from my local parks, from like so many places I go, I see lots of packet of papers on the floor, and I'm like, but actually, and that's kind of like not good for the environment.
Yeah, I think there needs to be this kind of societal shift in thinking, doesn't there, about things like that. I think why are we doing that when our environment's in crisis? Definitely thinking about how can we kind of move people's thinking, even like the little things like that you say. Yeah, it's really important.
And I think it's so important that we maybe have litter pickers that are young people, maybe volunteers, or maybe in general, we create like a cafe, like what you mentioned, like maybe like a mental health cafe, and for young people to come and be educated about climate change.
Absolutely.
To come on and talk about it, and talk about litter, talk about fossil fuels, and just everything really, and really educate them to do better for our society.
Absolutely, yeah. And thinking about communities coming together a bit more, because I think, when we talk about politicians and people like that, they're obviously not acting at the speed and scale that we need. So it's the communities that on the front lines that are doing the work that's needed. So can communities come together? And you're absolutely right. I'm really passionate about. I don't think young people have enough education about the environment, do they? I don't know about you, whether you learned about it much in school. No, I definitely didn't either. And I think that's crucial, isn't it, to educate the next generation? Absolutely.
Get the MPs as well there as well, like in local areas, and maybe also national, try and get some MPs there, but also get people in power to come and really to see what young people are saying so that they can help.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
Absolutely, let's do it. And what is one piece of advice to a young person interested in climate change but don't know how to make that difference?
Yeah, that's a really nice question. I think for me, when I was younger, a teenager, when I first kind of got into activism, it kind of felt like there was only one way to do activism, and that was blocking a road or things like that, which I think there's a place for. I don't mind doing that. I think direct action works, but just thinking about your skills, really, thinking about everyone and everything is affected by this thing called the climate crisis, and so what are your passions and what are your skills, and how can you use those to kind of help in different ways to make your industry more sustainable, or just using those skills to help in the fight against the climate crisis. For me, I always come back to creativity. I kind of grew up performing on stage, and I love theatre and the arts, and I now kind of work in kind of communications using storytelling to kind of speak about different issues like migrant justice as well as climate justice, and so for me that's where I kind of use my skills to kind of feel like I'm making a difference. So I'd say that to any other young people listening, don't feel so overwhelmed by the big scale of it and feel like you need to be like a climate scientist and you need to have all the answers. I think use your skills and use your passions to create change. I think that's really, really important.
I love that piece of advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And to finish this episode, a bonus question: what is that one word to sum up climate change to you?
Gosh, give me a moment. I'd say something like, I want to say scary, but then I also want to say opportunity, and there's a lot we can do and a lot we can take, and maybe community. We've talked a lot about that, haven't we? Communities are so powerful in creating change, and particularly when it comes to climate change.
Wow, I love that. Love that, community. That's a great way to end this episode. So thank you so much, Tash, for coming on Thursday Thoughts today to talk about climate change on your journey and also inspire lots of young people.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the podcast episode. This is a Beaver Change Media Network production. Please support the podcast by subscribing and rating the podcast. I'd love to hear what you like and what could be better for future episodes. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram and @Troy, and also on X _Troy. Tune in to next week's episode.